we have a fully working game, we need to make a very important decision right now. So we have our player here standing on the floor, and we have the jumping enemy. And we do all of this in a scene called game, which we thought it would be a good idea to rename later. But the problem is we're going to make 6 different games, or even more if you want. Okay, this is going to be one of the challenges that you have to take once you finish this course. The problem is there are lots of things that are common between the games. We have the player, we have the floor, we're going to have some art assets that are going to be here. So it's going to be a bit more difficult and a bit more not organized to tune things, to change the art, to change the player. We would have to check all of the scenes that we make, all of the games that we make, and that might not be good, okay, for a game that should be simple in its essence and should be very quick to play. So what we want to do is to transform this controller that we make, the avoider game controller, is something that's more generic. So instead of being responsible only for the avoider game, we want it to be responsible for all the games that we have. Okay, so what we have right now is we have a gameplay section that has a reference for the player and the duration. We have a part for the UI that talks about the info text. We have timer, game over, win, and all of the things that we see here, they are going to be used in every game that you make. Okay, the game over logic is going to be the same, the timer logic is going to be the same. Just a few things are going to change between different games. Okay, controls, for example, they change a little bit between games, but in general, this is everything that we're going to use in every game that we make. So what I recommend doing right now is you're going to rename the avoider game controller to simply game controller. Okay, let me remove that extra character, and we're going to enter that renamed file that we made right now, and we're going to rename the class. Okay, so let me edit here, game controller. I'm going to double click, so it's going to be open in mono, and I'm going to remove the avoider part. Okay, just game controller. Once we do this, we're going to the game controller, and I'm going to update the script here. Okay, and everything else is going to be back. We have the player, the duration, the info text. And one of the most important steps to make this very reusable is by changing how the jumping enemy is going to be added to the scene. Right now it is just standing in the middle. Okay, the game starts with that already here. But we want the game controller to be responsible for spawning this jumping enemy. Why do we want to do this? We're going to make multiple levels, okay? We're going to make, for example, 10 different levels, and each of these levels are going to have different difficulty settings. One of the difficulty settings for this jumping game, okay, to avoid this jumping enemy, is the amount of enemies that we're going to have. So if you were going to make a level 10, for example, you would want to have 3 jumping enemies. You would need an extra scene just for that. Okay, so 3 jumping enemies, another scene. 4 jumping enemies, another scene. That would be really messy, and we can do this in a smarter way. So what we should do is transform this jumping enemy into a prefab. And a prefab works just like any game object. It is a game object. Okay, but the difference is that it's going to be saved in our project so we can reuse it later. This is very important when we are making objects that are reused and duplicated, like coins, like health kits, for example. This is very common when you're making a game. So to transform this jumping enemy into a prefab, we're going to the project folder, you right click, then create, and then folder, and we're going to name this prefabs. And inside that prefabs folder, we need to make the prefab for the jumping enemy. There are 2 ways to make that prefab. You can come here in this folder, right click, create, and then you choose prefab and name this whatever you want, so jumping enemy, for example, and you're going to see that you have a white cube. That means nothing has been assigned here yet. So you can now select a jumping enemy from the hierarchy, drag and drop here. You notice that it turned blue for a brief second, and it's the actual icon, it's a blue cube, and you can now see a preview of the jumping enemy. And there's also another way to make a prefab. You can just click on it, drag and drop here, and Unity is going to understand that you're making a prefab so you can reuse it later. Okay, so we have this jumping enemy right here. And well, it still works as a prefab, okay? The game is going to be working pretty much the same. The jumping enemy is going to fall, you have to avoid it like this, and it's going to behave the exact same way. So what we need to understand now is how to dynamically add this jumping enemy here in this game. So let's learn how to do this.